Imagine a pharaoh who dared to challenge the gods themselves, a ruler who shattered thousands of years of tradition and rewrote the very laws of power. His name was Akhenaten, and his story is one of the most dramatic tales ever told from ancient Egypt. But why was he erased from history? Why were his statues smashed to pieces, his temples torn down, and his name nearly forgotten? Get ready to uncover the secrets of Egypt's most mysterious pharaoh. In ancient times, Egypt was a land where gods and pharaohs ruled side by side, where religion and power were woven together like the finest threads of royal linen. But in the 14th century before Christ, one pharaoh emerged with an idea so revolutionary it would shake the empire to its foundations. Akhenaten declared that there was only one true god, Aten, the sun disk that blazed in the Egyptian sky. This wasn't just a change in religion, it was a complete upheaval of everything the Egyptian people held sacred. Think about it. In a world where dozens of gods governed every aspect of life, from the flooding of the Nile to the growth of crops, one man dared to say they were all false. Akhenaten didn't stop at religion. He transformed Egyptian art, dismantled the political structure, and even built an entirely new capital city in the middle of the desert. His reign marks one of the most fascinating and controversial chapters in ancient history. And here's something that might surprise you. This radical revolution happened more than 3,000 years ago, yet its impact still echoes through time. Some scholars even suggest that Akhenaten's ideas influenced the development of monotheistic religions that would emerge centuries later. If you love uncovering the mysteries of great empires and want to explore more incredible stories like this one, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to Legacy of Empires, and ring that notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Before he became the revolutionary pharaoh we know as Akhenaten, he was just another ruler in the long line of Egyptian kings. Born as Amun IV, he seemed destined to follow the same path as his ancestors, worshipping the traditional gods, building the usual temples, and maintaining the delicate balance between royal power and religious authority. But something extraordinary happened during his reign. Many historians believe the catalyst for change was his great royal wife, the legendary Nefertiti. Her name meant "the beautiful one has come," and ancient artwork suggests she was far more than just a queen. She was a partner in the greatest religious revolution Egypt had ever seen. In the 5th year of his reign, Amun IV made a decision that would shake the foundations of ancient Egypt. He changed his name to Akhenaten, meaning the one who serves Aten, and declared that the sun disk, Aten, was not just one god among many. It was the only true god. This was unthinkable in a land that had worshipped hundreds of deities for thousands of years. Now, here's where things get really interesting. By abandoning the worship of Amun-Ra, traditionally considered the king of the gods, Akhenaten wasn't just making a spiritual statement, he was launching a political earthquake. The priests of Amun were incredibly powerful at the time. They owned vast estates, collected taxes, and some historians say they had become almost as powerful as the pharaoh himself. By declaring their god false, Akhenaten effectively cut them off at the knees. And here's something fascinating that many people don't know. Akhenaten might have been one of the world's first monotheists, believing in the existence of only one god. This was more than 1,000 years before Judaism became firmly established, and nearly 1,500 years before Christianity began. When you think about it, it's mind-blowing. This Egyptian pharaoh was pioneering the concept of one supreme deity in a world where everyone believed in multiple gods. The changes he introduced were radical. Instead of depicting Aten as a human figure with a falcon head like other Egyptian gods, Akhenaten insisted on representing his god as a simple sun disk with rays ending in human hands. These hands reached down to earth, offering the key of life to Akhenaten and his family. It was a completely new way of thinking about divinity. and it would change Egypt forever, though perhaps not in the way Akhenaten had hoped. Unlike the old gods, who ruled specific aspects of life, Aten was presented as a universal deity, the source of all life and creation. Some scholars even suggest that the famous Great Hymn to the Aten, possibly written by Akhenaten himself, shares remarkable similarities with Psalm 104 in the Bible. Could this pharaoh's revolutionary ideas have influenced the development of later monotheistic religions? It's a question that continues to intrigue historians to this day. Akhenaten's revolutionary spirit wasn't confined to religion. He completely transformed Egyptian art in ways that still astonish us today. For 3,000 years before him, Egyptian art had followed strict rules. Every pharaoh was portrayed the same way, young, strong, and perfect, with the same rigid poses that hadn't changed since the time of the pyramids. But Akhenaten was about to break every artistic rule in the book. Under his reign, Egyptian artists were suddenly free to explore new ways of depicting the world. Gone were the stiff, formal portraits of the past. Instead, we see intimate family scenes that would have been unthinkable before. Akhenaten and Nefertiti playing with their daughters, the royal couple sharing tender moments and daily life in the palace. It was as if someone had suddenly switched on a camera after thousands of years of staged photographs. The most striking changes appear in how Akhenaten chose to portray himself. If you look at his statues and carvings, you might be shocked. They show him with an elongated head, thick lips, a long neck, and a body shape that puzzled historians for centuries. His belly is soft and rounded, his hips are wide, and his limbs are unusually long and slender. Some of these statues are so different from traditional Egyptian art that when they were first discovered, archaeologists weren't sure if they were looking at a king or a queen. Here's something fascinating. While some scholars initially thought these unusual depictions might indicate some kind of medical condition, many now believe they were intentionally symbolic. Akhenaten wanted to embody both masculine and feminine characteristics to reflect his belief that Aten, the sun disk, contained all aspects of creation. He was essentially saying that just as his god transcended normal categories, so did he, as God's chosen representative on earth. The artistic revolution went beyond just the royal family. Artists began depicting plants, animals, and common people with unprecedented naturalism. The sun's rays were shown reaching down with tiny hands, touching and giving life to everything below. There's an energy and movement in the art of this period that we just don't see in traditional Egyptian art. Birds seem to flutter, plants appear to sway in the breeze, and for the first time in Egyptian history, artists were capturing moments rather than ideals. Think about how radical this was. Imagine if someone today suddenly declared that all art had to be completely different from everything that came before. That's exactly what Akhenaten did. He wasn't just changing art, he was changing how people saw the world and themselves. Even more remarkably, he insisted that his artists depict him with all his human imperfections, something no pharaoh had ever done before. In a culture obsessed with perfection and eternal youth, Akhenaten chose to be shown as he really was, flaws and all. It was a statement as revolutionary as his religious beliefs. The divine could exist in the imperfect, the unusual, and the unique. This artistic revolution would prove to be one of the most creative periods in Egyptian history, though it lasted only as long as Akhenaten's reign. After his death, the artists who had created these groundbreaking works would see their creations destroyed or buried, and Egyptian art would return to its traditional forms. But the images they created continue to captivate us today, offering a window into a brief moment when everything changed in the land of the pharaohs. Imagine building an entire city from scratch in the middle of nowhere. That's exactly what Akhenaten did when he created Akhenaten, the city of the horizon of Aten. This wasn't just any city, this was to be the perfect city, built to honor his one god, untainted by the old religions and traditions. The location he chose was remarkable. About halfway between the old capitals of Memphis and Thebes, Akhenaten discovered a bay in the cliffs along the Nile that he claimed was marked by the rising sun, a sign from Aten himself. Today, we know this place as Amarna, but in its time, it was one of the most ambitious construction projects ever attempted. Picture this. In just a few years, an empty stretch of desert was transformed into a gleaming metropolis. The city stretched for 8 miles along the Nile, with wide streets, grand palaces, and elaborate temples open to the sky, because Akhenaten believed his god shouldn't be hidden away in dark sanctuaries like the old gods. The Royal Road, the main street of the city, was more than 200 feet wide, wider than many modern highways. The royal palace was a wonder to behold. Its walls were decorated with vibrant paintings showing natural scenes, birds in flight, and the royal family basking in the rays of Aten. The great temple to Aten could fit 10 modern football fields within its walls. But unlike traditional Egyptian temples, it had no roof. Everything was open to the sun's rays. But here's where the story takes a darker turn. While Akhenaten and Nefertiti lived in splendor with their loyal followers, trouble was brewing. The common people of Egypt weren't happy about abandoning their beloved gods. Imagine being told that the deities your family had worshipped for countless generations were suddenly forbidden, that you couldn't pray to Isis for protection during childbirth or ask Thoth for wisdom, or seek Osiris's blessing for your loved ones in the afterlife. Archaeological evidence tells us a fascinating story. While official buildings and temples strictly followed Akhenaten's new religion, archaeologists have found small amulets and household shrines showing that many people secretly kept worshipping their traditional gods. They were literally hiding their beliefs under the floorboards. Meanwhile, the priests of Amun, though stripped of their official power, hadn't gone away. They maintained their networks and influence, waiting for their chance to restore the old ways. The common people's discontent and the priests' quiet resistance created a powder keg that would eventually explode. What's truly remarkable is that Akhenaten built this entire city in just 15 years. Think about that. A completely new capital city, constructed from nothing, in less time than it takes to build some modern shopping malls. But perhaps he built it too quickly. The foundations were shallow, the buildings hastily constructed. It's as if he knew he was racing against time. And here's a thought that makes you wonder. Was Akhenaten a visionary ahead of his time, trying to lead his people toward a more enlightened future? Or was he a religious zealot whose radical changes went too far, too fast? If you're enjoying this journey through one of history's most fascinating periods, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Legacy of Empires for more incredible historical tales. Let us know in the comments, do you think Akhenaten was a revolutionary visionary or a heretical radical who pushed his people too far? Was building a new capital in the middle of nowhere a bold statement of faith, or the act of a ruler who'd lost touch with reality? The debate continues to this day, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. The end of Akhenaten's story is perhaps the most dramatic chapter of all. When he died around 1336 before Christ, the reaction was swift and merciless. It was as if ancient Egypt itself was trying to forget he had ever existed. His own son, the boy king Tutankhamun, yes, the famous King Tut, whose golden tomb would captivate the world thousands of years later, was forced to turn against his father's legacy. Imagine being just 9 or 10 years old and having to denounce everything your father believed in. Young Tutankhamun's original name was actually Tutankhaten, meaning living image of Aten, but he was made to change it to Tutankhamun, honoring the old god Amun instead. The beautiful city of Akhenaten was abandoned almost overnight. The courts, temples, and palaces that had buzzed with life became ghost towns. The desert winds began to blow sand through empty streets that would remain buried for more than 3,000 years. But the priests and new rulers weren't content with just abandoning Akhenaten's city. They wanted to erase him from history completely. Teams of workers were sent out across Egypt with chisels and hammers. They systematically destroyed every image of Akhenaten they could find. His name was carved out of monuments, his statues were smashed, and his temples were dismantled stone by stone. The priests even tried to destroy any mention of the Aten. It was one of the most thorough attempts at erasing someone from history ever recorded. Here's something fascinating. The ancient Egyptians believed that to speak someone's name was to give them eternal life. By destroying Akhenaten's name and images, they weren't just trying to forget him, they were trying to deny him immortality itself. They wanted to ensure his soul would have no anchor in this world or the next. But here's the irony. This very attempt to erase Akhenaten actually helped preserve his legacy. Many of the stones from his temples were used as filling material in other buildings, where they remained hidden and protected for thousands of years. When archaeologists discovered them in modern times, these broken pieces helped tell his story. The question that haunts historians today is, why did they hate him so much? Was it just about religion, or was there something more? Some scholars suggest that Akhenaten's reforms had weakened Egypt. While he was focused on his religious revolution, the empire's territories in Syria and Canaan were slipping away. Letters have been found from Egyptian allies begging for help against invaders, but Akhenaten appears to have ignored them, perhaps too absorbed in his spiritual mission. Others argue that his radical changes had simply gone too far, too fast. He had tried to change not just religion, but the very way people thought about the divine and their place in the world. For a society built on tradition and stability, this was simply too much to accept. What makes this story even more remarkable is that we might never have known about Akhenaten if it weren't for modern archaeology. When his city was finally excavated in modern times, archaeologists found themselves piecing together one of the most extraordinary stories of ancient Egypt. Letters written on clay tablets, broken statues, and fragments of wall paintings gradually revealed the tale of this mysterious pharaoh who dared to change everything. The discovery of Akhenaten's story shows us that even when people try to erase history, traces always remain. Like a detective story written in stone and sand, his legacy survived despite every attempt to destroy it. Perhaps that's the greatest irony of all. The pharaoh they tried so hard to forget became one of the most fascinating figures in Egyptian history. Even today, more than 3,000 years after his death, Akhenaten continues to fascinate and puzzle historians, archaeologists, and anyone interested in ancient mysteries. The theories about who he really was and what motivated his revolutionary changes are as numerous as the grains of sand in his desert city. Let's start with one of the most intriguing mysteries, his unusual physical appearance. If you look at the statues and reliefs of Akhenaten, you'll see something remarkable. He's depicted with an elongated skull, a thin neck, wide hips, and a protruding belly. This has led some medical historians to suggest he might have suffered from various genetic conditions. Some think he had Marfan syndrome, which affects the body's connective tissue. Others propose he had Froelich syndrome, which could explain his feminine features. But here's where it gets really interesting. What if these weren't signs of illness at all? Some scholars argue that Akhenaten deliberately chose to be portrayed this way. They suggest he was trying to appear as both male and female, combining the two aspects of creation, just as his god Aten was supposed to contain all aspects of life. Think about it. In a culture where pharaohs were always shown as perfect specimens of masculinity, Akhenaten chose to break every artistic convention. Was this a statement about his religious beliefs, rather than a reflection of his actual appearance? Another fascinating theory focuses on the political dimension of his religious revolution. Some historians believe that Akhenaten's devotion to Aten was actually a clever power play. The priests of Amun had become incredibly powerful. They owned vast tracts of land, collected taxes, and some scholars estimate they controlled about 1/3 of Egypt's wealth. By declaring that only Aten was worthy of worship, Akhenaten effectively stripped these priests of their power and redirected all that wealth to the crown. Was his religious fervor actually a cover for a massive power grab? But perhaps the most thought-provoking theory is that Akhenaten was one of history's first religious visionaries. Some scholars have pointed out striking similarities between his great hymn to the Aten and Psalm 104 in the Bible. Both texts praise a single, universal deity as the source of all life. Both describe this God's rays or light reaching down to earth. Could Akhenaten have influenced the development of later monotheistic religions? And here's something that might blow your mind. Some researchers suggest that Moses might have been familiar with Akhenaten's ideas. According to their timeline calculations, Moses would have lived not too long after Akhenaten's reign. Could the concept of one all-powerful God have influenced the foundations of Judaism and through it Christianity and Islam? While most scholars are skeptical of direct connections, the parallels are fascinating to consider. The truth is, Akhenaten remains one of ancient Egypt's greatest mysteries. Was he a mad king whose religious obsession weakened his empire? A brilliant political strategist who used religion to consolidate his power? Or a visionary prophet who glimpsed concepts that would reshape human spirituality thousands of years later? Perhaps that's why we find him so fascinating, because like all great historical mysteries, Akhenaten's story can be interpreted in multiple ways. He was either centuries ahead of his time or dangerously out of touch with reality. He was either a courageous reformer or a destructive zealot. He was either Egypt's first monotheist or its greatest heretic. In the end, maybe that's Akhenaten's true legacy. Not just what he did, but what he makes us question about ourselves. How do we view those who challenge everything we believe? Do we celebrate them as visionaries or condemn them as heretics? The answer, as Akhenaten's story shows us, often depends on who wins the right to tell the tale. As we come to the end of our journey through one of ancient Egypt's most fascinating chapters, we can't help but marvel at the extraordinary legacy of Akhenaten. Here was a pharaoh who dared to dream of a different world, a world with one God, new forms of art, and a complete reimagining of what Egyptian society could be. He challenged traditions that had stood for thousands of years, turned religious doctrine upside down, and literally built his vision from the desert sands. But Akhenaten's story teaches us something profound about the nature of change itself. It reminds us that those who dare to challenge the established order often face fierce resistance. Think about it. His name was chiseled from monuments, his city was abandoned, and his memory was nearly lost to time. Yet here we are, more than 3,000 years later, still talking about his revolutionary ideas and debating their meaning. The questions his reign raises are just as relevant today as they were in ancient times. What happens to those who dare to challenge deeply held beliefs? What price do visionaries pay for being ahead of their time? When someone tries to change everything at once, are they brave or foolish? The answers often depend on who's telling the story and when it's being told. Perhaps that's why Akhenaten's story continues to captivate us. In many ways, he represents everyone who has ever tried to change the world, everyone who has ever stood up and said, there must be a better way. Whether we see him as a heroic reformer or a dangerous heretic says as much about us as it does about him. And speaking of fascinating stories from the ancient world, we're just getting started here at Legacy of Empires. If you've enjoyed uncovering the mysteries of Akhenaten, you'll love what's coming next. We'll be exploring more incredible tales from the ancient world, from the rise and fall of mighty empires to the controversial rulers who shaped history. Make sure you don't miss any of our upcoming adventures through time by hitting that subscribe button right now. Ring that notification bell to join our community of history enthusiasts, and don't forget to like this video if you've enjoyed our journey into ancient Egypt's most controversial pharaoh. Share this video with anyone you know who loves a good historical mystery or who's fascinated by ancient civilizations, and let us know in the comments, do you think Akhenaten was a visionary ahead of his time, or a ruler who pushed too far, too fast? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this fascinating figure from history. Join us next time as we uncover more incredible stories from the ancient world. Until then, this is Legacy of Empires, where the past comes alive and history's greatest mysteries are waiting to be discovered. See you in our next historical adventure.